Hey guys, welcome to my channel or welcome back. Today I am going to talk about Nieuw Statendam cabins to avoid. So if you are going to be sailing on the Nieuw Statendam cruise ship, there are a few cabins or staterooms that will make your cruise horrible. So I have 7 tips on cabins to avoid, and I'm gonna jump right in. Okay, so the first and probably the worst cabin, in my opinion, on the Nieuw Statendam ship are the cabins on deck 8 at the back of the ship. On all of the Holland America cruise ships, except maybe the really old ones, the adult pool is at the back of the ship. And every single night, they pull all of the lounge chairs, and then in the morning, first thing, like 6 a.m., they drag all of the lounge chairs out again. So if you want to go to bed at a reasonable hour and sleep in past 6 a.m., do not get a cabin on the Nieuw Statendam ship on deck 8 at the back below the adult pool. You will be miserable. Okay, the second place to avoid on the Nieuw Statendam ship is on deck 1 in the middle of the ship, because you will be below B.B. King Blues Band, which is loud at night and plays until 11:30 or so p.m. Same thing, tip number 3 is avoid deck 1 below the rock and roll band, which is on deck 2, so you don't want to be on deck 1, kind of in the middle of the ship as well. So basically avoid deck 1, middle of the ship, unless you plan on staying up until 11:30 or so, because the bands do play pretty late. Okay, the fourth cabin that you want to avoid on the Nieuw Statendam ship is deck 4, balcony. Here's why. You will have an obstructed view. So if you're not paying a whole lot of money, no big deal, but on deck 4 on the Nieuw Statendam ship, your balcony view, you'll have a balcony, and then you'll see bright orange and white lifeboats outside your balcony. So yeah, you'll be able to open up your balcony and have fresh air, but you'll see bright orange lifeboats, which kind of defeats the purpose of having a balcony room with a beautiful view where you can sit on your balcony. So avoid deck 4, balcony. That's tip number 4. Okay, tip number 5 is the back of the boat. Mostly on deck 1, it can be horrible, but in general, the back of the boat is where the engine is on Holland America cruise ships. I have luckily never stayed at the back of the boat on deck 1, but I heard in the reviews and from other people that it's really, really loud and there's no way to avoid it. So don't stay at the back of the boat on the Nieuw Statendam ship. Okay, tip number 6 of cabins to avoid is the front of the ship on basically any level of the cruise ship. That's because the front of the boat is what gets all of the action, and it can be bumpy when there's bad waves. Now, Holland America has really good stabilizers, and in my experience, it's usually only really rocky, like the first day on a cruise ship when they're like trying to get out to the first destination, and then they tend to go a little bit slower of a pace. But if you have any sort of, if you think you might get seasick, basically just avoid the very front of the ship on any level on Holland America cruise ships. And then tip number 7 is, of cabins to avoid, is way up high. So decks 8, 10, and 11, they can just also be a little bit rockier. Again, not a big deal, Actually, a lot of the really nice or bigger staterooms are on decks 8, 10, and 11. But if you are prone to seasickness, I would avoid, I guess I need water, those cabins. So in summary, I'm gonna wrap it up. Actually, I'm gonna get water and then I'm gonna be right back. Now let's wrap it up. So in summary, these are the cabins to avoid on the Nieuw Statendam ship on Holland America cruise ships, and then I'll cover the best cabins to stay in my opinion. Okay, so 1, avoid being below the adult pool on, and also avoid being below the Lido pool, the main pool. So basically, avoid deck 8 in summary. 2 is avoid being below BB King. And then 3 is avoid being below the rock and roll band. So basically, avoid being on deck 1 in the middle of the ship. 4 is avoid being on deck 4, because if you want a view, you'll have a view of the lifeboats. 5 is avoid the very back of the ship, especially on deck 1. 6 is avoid the very, very front of the ship because you'll get seasick. And 7 is avoid being up really, really high on decks 8, 10, or 11 because you might get seasick. Okay, now let's talk about the best places to stay on a Nieuw Statendam cruise ship. My experience is deck 3's good, deck 5's good, deck 6 and 7, anywhere in the middle. I find the sweet spot is to be on decks 5 or 6. Like my mom and I, when we cruise, we always stay on decks 5 or 6 on any Holland America cruise ship, including the Nieuw Statendam. Here's why. Decks 5 or 6, you're like in the middle level. You're not low, you're not below the bands or anything like that. You're close to deck 3 for walking around outside on the promenade deck. You're close to the BB King band at night on deck 2. The Lido is a little bit of a walk, but that's no big deal. And you're close to the dining room as well if you're on decks 5 or 6. And then if you're in the middle of the ship, you're in the middle of the action, you're not near the engine, you're not at the front, you're not going to get seasick. And then if you can, look at the map on where the elevators are. Ideally, of course, there's like, I kind of want to draw this for you guys. I'm gonna draw this really quickly. So like, here's, I'm not a drawer. This is my map. See, if this is an elevator, and this is a hallway connecting people to the elevator, and these are all staterooms here, avoid choosing a stateroom right here. The reason for that is on the last day of a cruise ship, on the Nieuw Statendam ship or any Holland America cruise ships, they will start collecting all of the luggage here and kind of like pulling it to this entry area really early in the morning for people as they get off the ship. So if you are staying in the stateroom right here, which is where my mom and I stayed last time, starting around like 5 a.m. on disembarkation day, you will hear everybody walking by. And are my teeth blue? Oh, I just had blueberries and chocolate. Whoops. And it will just be really, really loud. So avoid a room here. But in summary, Nieuw Statendam ship, decks 5 or 6, or honestly 7 or 4 are going to be good if you do the middle of the ship. If you thought this video was helpful, please leave a comment below. Let me know. Please subscribe. It makes my day. And happy cruising.